slide, but let's give it a shot.
Hello, Argentina. Can you hear me? Yes. Oh, good. Certainly. Oh, I guess I should share my screen. Okay, can you see the slide? Yes? Yes. 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 Okay. Okay, there. Hello, thank you everyone for listening. Can you see the whole current slide just to confirm, because I can't see what you're seeing?
No.
Oh, good. So I'll be talking today a little bit about what I've learned about sponsoring Kohacon development and just in general about working with open source software projects as not a developer, but someone who wants something developed. I'm the right person for this talk because I was release manager for Kohacon 3.12. I've developed a number of features for Kohacon. I've worked with other unrelated open source projects, and I've worked with a lot of libraries and other institutions who were interested in bringing in some sort of building some sort of additional functionality in the open source software they use, but perhaps didn't know exactly how it should go about doing that in a way that would, to the extent possible, their inclusion. Yep. You can't see slides. Okay. Okay, that's good. Are the slides visible now? No. Okay, let's try. Okay, let me try that then. Okay, are the slides visible now? Oh, good. I'm glad to hear that. So, the first issue that most, if not all, development projects run into is scoping. We have to, as developers and as people who want developers to do things for us, we have to determine exactly what it is we want done or want to do. And we have to communicate that to the people who need to know. So I've prepared the slide in the form of hints for, so lessons I've learned mostly the hard way. So the key to project scoping are a clear definition of what the scope is. So, for example, I am a heavy user of authority in Koha. And one of my earlier projects included the scope, improve the authority module so that it's more usable. Needless to say, that project didn't get very far. In hindsight, what I really needed was to define exactly what needed improvement. For example, improve the identification of duplicate authority in Koha or authority module. And ideally, I should even have gone a little bit further and said, improve Koha's identification of duplicate authorities so that two authorities with the exact same heading will be recognized as duplicate, even if there are slight punctuation changes. Second point on project scoping is buy-in from stakeholders. So when I'm developing for myself, I'm pretty much the only stakeholder, but as librarians, we're generally not just developing something for ourselves. It's for our users, it's for our staff, it's for, at some extent, developers who are building it, and it's for the larger community in open source projects like Koha. It's not enough for us to develop something for us. What we really want is to develop something for Koha that we can then use and take advantage of, and people we've never met halfway around the world can also use and take advantage of. And the way to convince people that your idea is a good one is defining clearly, first of all, but also communicating clearly. So that when someone says, could you explain to me what exactly you're working on? You're able to say, absolutely. This project is important because it will save 50% of the time of the people who manage authority files. It will mean that fewer developers have to answer questions about how authorities work. It means that the reference librarians will be able to use the source, whatever benefits there may be. You want to communicate clearly the scope. And once you define the scope, of course, you need to actually get started on the project and look at designing the project not in terms of user interface, but in terms of how is the project going to go in a week, month, or a year that you'll be working on it. And what I have learned, again, mostly the hard way, is that the keys are minimal impact on other areas of the system. It's all very well to have a wonderful idea, but if your idea requires changing not just the authority module, but also installation, and the OPAC and acquisition, it's not going to work well, because someone else is going to do some work and on one of those areas, and suddenly you're going to have to start over. The second thing I've learned is the importance of milestones. If you can't measure your progress, it's really hard to keep people excited, especially in a project as large as large and as busy as Koha. You don't want your project to appear to drag so long that your QA team, for example, concludes that you're not working on it, and perhaps misses when you finally submit your final version during a particularly busy time. Sorry, someone just told me that I'm not entirely audible. Is that any better, Thomas? I'm using a headset. So it's as close to my mouth as it can get. I will see if I can increase the volume somehow. It is, yeah, so the volume is all the way up. Hopefully you can mostly hear me. I'll try and talk louder. I mentioned measurable milestones, and the other thing, as I indicated before, with minimal impact on other areas of the system, when you're designing a project, you always want to think of it, what else is happening? Is there any way I can make kind of like easier by doing something that I was pretty much going to be doing anyway? Or alternatively, is there a way I can avoid making Pulse Light more difficult by choosing one of the two options that, from my point of view, and once we've planned out the project, obviously, next step is actually developing it. As a release manager, my very favorite thing here was I have some code and I've released it. Even if I'm hearing that I'll advise, however it's awful that please don't use it, that heads up and the visibility of the code early in the process meant that I could actually plan ahead to a certain extent and make sure that development that was going on were actually incorporated. Another thing that was being asked for my thoughts on any development questions that were eventually going to need my thoughts. And the earlier you asked questions, either the release manager, Tomas at the moment, or the other developers, the more useful feedback you can get. I learned that from both sides as a developer. There have been a few projects where I did not necessarily ask for feedback early enough, and invariably this involved starting over, which is not something that developers. Finally, you always want your developers to follow any coding guidelines or best practices that are in effect for the project. In the case of Koha, there's a weekly page with coding guidelines that can easily refer your developers to. So the good news is we've now finished the development, and we're moving on to the most important aspect of the process of getting code into Koha or any other active system. Testing. Testing is one of the most important part of every development project out there. doesn't work, it's a lot harder to make sure the code works. So testing is also unfortunately one of the hardest parts because developers can't really test their own code because in many cases we are so accustomed to what we expect it to do that we're going to conclude that it's working even if the way it's working is, well, crazy. So it's important to bring in other people to do testing, and in order to get other people involved, people not involved in the original development, you really have to help people understand why the issue is there. And that is, for all of us, a really challenging thing, because we all know why we care about a particular feature we want, but if other libraries don't work the same way, don't have the same workflows, they might not be any reason to care, and that's where our good communication comes in and making sure that we really communicate to people the benefits for our libraries and for libraries that maybe need something a little different but could use our feature. And then the next two are particularly important in a project as large as Koha. There are always a ton of features in testing, and people are a lot more likely to spend the time to thoroughly test your new feature if they know that you're the type of organization that will spend the time to test their new feature. And so I really cannot emphasize enough the importance of good faith and making an effort to test other people's code. And I know that a lot of people hate to be in a situation where they have to mark something as failed because it doesn't work. But as a developer, I would much rather know early, oh, sorry, the development doesn't work, and fix it than find out at the 11th hour that, oh, the reason no one has finished testing my development is because no one can figure out how to get it working. And that, of course, leads to my point number 3, which is a lot of feedback we get from testers and from other developers and institutions is, well, it's certainly constructive, but it is perhaps not phrased in the most positive of terms. And one of the things that I struggle with, and I think probably most developers struggle with, is avoiding letting my ego get involved. When someone looks at my code and says, that's really poorly written, or tests my project and says, that doesn't work at all, it's not about me, and it's something that I always struggle to remember, and I imagine a lot of other people do too, is about the code or the project, and do it, fix it, because it's really not about us. And if instead our development is much faster than if we, for example, argue that no, it might be better. And I know I'm certainly guilty of that in the past, but I do my best to avoid it now. So, assuming we get through the testing and get the project in, that's not the end of a development project, especially not in something in a large system that is constantly evolving. It has to be maintained. And unfortunately, maintaining big features is just plain hard. And I don't really have a lot of advice. However, the two things that I have learned are, if you're designing a feature, and it's very specific. You can make it a little less specific so that other people will want to use it. It's a lot more likely that someone else will help you with maintaining that feature in newer versions of Koha. And if you write any features that are really extraordinarily specific, you really just have to go in and fix things that you're going to be maintaining it yourself. And unfortunately, I don't know any way around that. However, if we get to that point, I am happy to say that is, in fact, the end of the development process. And we can start over with planning a new project and continuing our contribution to Koha. So, with that, does anyone have any questions?
Jared, it's Bob Birchall here. Can you hear me? No, that's okay. What can developers do to perhaps prioritise the patches they've submitted as guidance for people who are signing off?
Thomas, you could repeat the question.
And what would be your advice for people with long-standing sites?
So unfortunately, that's really difficult because there are a lot of long-standing patches. My strategy with patches that have really been waiting for testing for a long time is try and find out why. A lot of people, or a lot of developers will know that when I write a patch and it's not getting any response, it's not uncommon for me to contact people and say, I'm not asking you to actually test this patch right now, but could you tell me anything you know about why people aren't testing it? Because a lot of times it comes back to what I mentioned earlier, which is people really hate saying, sorry, that's no good. And if there's something that a lot of people are uncomfortable with, it might be something very minor, but that can all scare people away from actually testing those patches. And as the author, it seems like everyone's ignoring them, when perhaps it's more like people are looking at it and saying, I don't want to be the person who, potentially threatens this other contributor. I'll leave and I'll hope someone else does. Does that address your question at all?
Yes.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Deborah.
Thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of the conference.
Thanks. What's it because to understand?
Bye.
tipo de desarrollo acá, tener el insumo de los usuarios para pensar COA para hacia adelante me pareció vital y era una oportunidad que no podíamos perder. Así que les pido que después del coffee break vengan muy entusiasmados a